And as you touched on there, Calvin Vlaanderen, I mean, Yamaha hadn't won an MXGP overall coming into the weekend. Calvin Vlaanderen hadn't been on the podium. For him to win and give Yamaha their first MXGP overall, he was quick. He done it quicker than any of the factory guys this year, and he hasn't even been on the podium before this weekend. I don't know what happened, but something must have just clicked. And unbelievable weekend, just phenomenal riding and phenomenal skill around such a brutal track.
He made quite an interesting comment for me after the first moto where he ran down Prado and Geyser at the end. He said there's more to come. He didn't look as tired as the other two. Now, we know subsequently that Tim had illness and we obviously knew that Prado had the shoulder issue, but Calvin's raw speed was on their level anyway. His fitness was fantastic, both motos, and the way he was going around the track, he was almost using less energy because he was so fluid on the bike. He just seemed to go to another level. And after that first moto, it was almost like he fully believed in himself and he knew that his performance wasn't even out of his comfort zone. And I wonder if the week before, the way he led for maybe, was it 10 minutes or so, maybe 15 in the first moto, if that gave him the confidence to realize, actually, I can run the pace of these guys. Because he mentioned about how important believing in himself was, and this was the first time he fully believed in himself that he could win, and he went out and delivered in style.
Absolutely. For me, I think it was the qualifying race was maybe the biggest thing of the weekend. I think after he won that and holding off Tim to do it as well, that gave him the confidence and the belief maybe that he's needed, that actually he can do it. And he woke up on Sunday, he brought the same kind of form, he brought his A game, and I think the 10 minutes extra probably suited him. Obviously, with Prado just returning with the shoulder injury and Geyser getting sick just before the event, so the longer moto actually suited him probably, and the rougher track, and he was just unbelievable. And hopefully, mentally, he seems to be in a good place now, and hopefully, he can continue this kind of form. We must remember at Madura, he was close to the podium. That's hard pack. We're going to be going to Spain next. It's a hard pack track, so okay, we're probably not expecting him to win there as well, but there should be no reason why I can't knock on the door for a podium at least. And that's still very, very good for Calvin Vlaanderen, considering before this weekend he had never even stood on the podium.
On his speed, even last year, in certain moments, in certain races, in certain rounds, he had strong speed and not far off that elite top five as it was back then. This year as well, he's shown glimpses of that speed. He hasn't always got away. This would seem to be the first round where it all came together, and it came together more perfectly than he could probably have dreamed of. I think that's the first time a South African's won an MXGP since Greg Albertine, and I grew up in that era of Greg Albertine winning. One of my favorite riders of the 90s, and he came from South Africa. And that's a big thing to do, to come from kind of outside the European or even the North American sphere of racing. And it's not even Australia, New Zealand, really, where they have good series. So to come from South Africa, we've seen Tyler Rattray do it, Gareth Swanepoel, but Calvin Vlaanderen, to come where he's come from, adapt to Europe, as it were, all these different countries, get used to the cold weather again, and climb that mountain, intermittently deal with all these injuries that he's had. Even the last two, end of last year, he was injured. He had to take some time off early before the end of the season. He's come back again. He's shown a lot of fighting spirit as well. It's not just talent, and he also lost that factory ride when he moved into MXGP. So he certainly hasn't had it easy. He's had to fight for everything he's got, and it was really, really nice to see the reward of that essentially three MotoGP win, if you include that qualifier, as you mentioned earlier. An unbelievable performance and richly deserved for everything he's done to try and work his way up to the top of this sport.
Absolutely. I think Albertine, the last GP he won was 94, and that was the year I was born. So
you wouldn't remember him then?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to make you feel really old here.
Right.
But yeah, unbelievable. And I think the Gavin Van Venrooy team deserve a lot of credit as well. They've obviously been they've stepped up a lot this year. I think the bike was already quite good last year, but a bit off the factory bikes. Over the winter, they've decided to go big. They've been able to source Star Yamaha engines, And I think that's been a big positive for the team and for Vlaanderen, just knowing that he has got the equipment now to battle with the factory bikes. And big credit that team. They've been in the GP paddock for a number of years. Obviously with Kawasaki, then they've made the switch to Yamaha. Always done a really good job, but I don't think their their realistic ambition before this year was to win. But I think now they know that they have a package and they have a rider capable of doing just that. So they'll be hoping now that that's not the last win. And I have to say, it's been a long time since a rider like that's, I think, surprised by winning such a big event. For me, you have to go the whole way back to 2013 when Sean Simpson beat Antonio Crowley at the Brutal Layoff, and he was racing a JK Yamaha at the time. And for me, that's very similar to this, and just such a big surprise. It kind of came out of nowhere. You wouldn't have been surprised to get on the podium, but the way he did it was just phenomenal, and it's a weekend he'll remember for the rest of his life. Really unbelievable.
Yeah, and the way he did it, I think, puts an exclamation mark on his win. He didn't hold shot either moto. He passed what was believed to be going in the two best riders in the class with Jeffrey Hurlings and Roman Fevright to win that first one. And the second one, he looked almost the way Geyser has this year. He was calm. He made his pass on Jonas. He waited a bit, then made a decisive pass on Jorge Prado and basically ran away from the field and potentially was able to enjoy it if you could ever enjoy 30-degree heat around a load of sand dunes. I don't know. But great to see him win. And I think the emotion at the end of the race told just about how hard it is to do that, even whenever you have the talent, and B, how much it means to sacrifice everything, leave your home country and come to Holland and Belgium and put in all those hours and all those laps and finally reach the goal that you've always set yourself.
Exactly, that's what it's all about. And it is nice to see that emotion. We're so used to seeing the top guys win. It's very, very difficult for somebody like Vlaanderen to come into MXGP and win a round. So I think all that hard work and all those sacrifices he's made, it was nice to see him let that out at the end of that moto. And that's why we love sport, and especially physical, demanding sport. It's very, very tough to get to the top, and that's a big weekend for Vlaanderen. Obviously, he's won a couple of GPs in MX2, but MXGP, the premier class, and I think doing it on a non-factory bike as well is another thing that's very difficult. So fair play, and unbelievable. Hopefully, he can keep the ball rolling now. And he said this definitely won't be the last. So fingers crossed he can stand on the top step a couple of times more this season. And the problem for the Calvin Vlaanderen are going to have now are the factory teams. I'm not quite sure why they didn't stop him up before, but I think now they'll definitely be sniffing around him and trying to secure him for the 2023 season.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. What do you see happening, Calvin? We know he was considered by Kawasaki this year. He had a Honda factory ride in MX2, but he stuck with Gavin, and Gavin have stuck with him and given him good equipment. What does this mean for Gavin? Will they potentially get more Yamaha support? Will it mean Calvin will go into the Yamaha factory, do you think, or will other teams be circling around him as well?
It's a difficult one. It really is. Obviously, it's probably going to come down to money. I think we're in a position now where Gavin probably do have a pretty good equipment, and maybe even better than some factory teams. But obviously, the budget they have wouldn't be as much. So maybe Yamaha could help pay a bit of his wage or something like that, and maybe keep him in the same sort of setup. I don't think he'll be in the full factory team because I believe they're only going to be running 2 next year, so they're actually going to be making the team smaller. I think Kawasaki is probably the most realistic factory bike you could see him on. And again, if they offer him a good deal financially, he'll probably take it. But you have to look at it now and say, is it that much of a step up in terms of equipment? Obviously, Ben is very, very hot and cold, but we'll probably have to see what Fevre can do when he comes back. If Fevre performs the same way he did last year when he gets back up to full speed, then we can probably say that the bike's good enough, and then it would be a good ride. But at the moment, it's hard to see him go to another factory team because Honda obviously looks
They're
like
looking
Ruben
ruined.
Fernandez is
Yeah.
getting promoted there, and it doesn't leave much. So I would say Kawasaki would be the one possibly if he was to leave the Gavin Van Venrooy team.
And then the other side of that, he's comfortable on that team. He knows the bike. And if Yamaha are going down to 2 and the full factory team, will that leave slightly more budget for Calvin to get Yamaha stuff in the Gavin team? Well, obviously he's already the bike sorted. The team know him, the mechanics and all that. So is there an option he could actually stay there if budgets are rejigged? If Yamaha are only having 2, instead of taking that risk to go to a brand new bike and a brand new team,